G'day guys, welcome back to another episode. Today I'm standing in the 100-foot drift level at Mount Shamrock, and I'm going to show you guys a really cool 3 episodes that are coming up. Why am I here? Because I've got a really cool story that I want to share with you guys, but there's a couple of things that I got wrong, so I just want to address those first just before we kick things off. The first thing is the geology of the mine. So we're standing in a bit of a chamber in here. We've got the 100-foot level that drives east to west. We've got the 55-foot level above us that runs along the same strike. And because of the size of these tunnels that we're in, made the assumption that they were from the 1980s. They are not. I recently read a mine report from this place from 1892, and the mine inspector was sent from the Department of Mines, and he saw this mine when it opened in 1887 that is. And he came back only a few years later, and this shaft at that stage was already 40 feet wide, and they had driven it from the 55 level down to the 100-foot level, and it actually drove all the way down to, I think, the 125-foot level, and he said within the next 2 years it had gone down to its current depth, which is about 215 feet. Now in that report, he also said that it was at that stage already 40 feet wide. So I'll show you guys in a sec. Now the other thing was that I thought it was limestone. There was only limestone, loosely compacted limestone in the first 20 feet, and the majority of this hill that's been bored through is actually all mud rock. And the deposit and where the gold was sort of formed from was obviously along these drifts, along these tunnels, but it was mainly from this main shaft here. But it was through all of the rocks that were in the deposit, all of this porphyry, all this brecciated material. It wasn't just housed in quartz. That's what made mining pretty tricky here. Another reason for the message at the start of this video is it's now the 17th of October. I think I'm going to air this sort of mid to maybe early November, not sure. And by that stage there'll be a lot of security cameras here, and I want to remind everyone that it is private property. As early as June this year, there's already been a series of trail cams that have been set up around this property. With a little bit of my help, there's now 2 motion detection cameras that are set up on this property, and there's also 2 LTE cameras. So the property owners definitely do not want people rummaging around this property for many reasons, but this is obviously one of them. It's a pretty dangerous site to explore. Other than that, the landowners are really nice people, and they've been let down by a lot of scumbags in the past. I mean, the landowner told me a story about someone that showed interest in some of the history out here and sort of came across as a bit of an amateur archaeologist, maybe a little bit like myself, and then the next time the property owner came out, they'd actually destroyed the brick kiln and taken all the bricks and just absolutely raided it. That was a brick kiln that was erected in around about the 1890s, so that's a pretty low life act. There's a mining lease here, so if you jump the fence with a metal detector, I'm going to assume you're getting a lot of trouble. So just steer clear, guys, and make sure you don't trespass at Mount Shamrock. The other thing about the geology as well that I missed, I'll show you guys in a sec on the west face of this enormous open stope or glory hole shaft, whatever you want to call it. They started mining this, and in 4 years they got it to roughly the depth that it's at now. I never knew until recently about how they actually pulled the ore out, but one really cool story that I missed when I was doing all my research for Shamrock was that all of the ore that was actually pulled out of here from the 100-foot level was actually, before they blasted this 100-foot level, and it was only the 55-foot level, all of the ore was pulled out of this monstrous shaft with horse and whim. I love those kind of stories. They are so cool, which means there was a big draft horse up topside, and he was doing laps around a big wooden cog that would have had like a probably pretty primitive differential on it, and that would have led to a chain or a rope that would have pulled down to like a shaft sinking bucket, and that is how the old timers got the ore out of here. So pretty cool. Another thing that I wanted to mention, I mentioned in the video a few times that there is a boiler here. I got really excited about it, and I kept calling it a locomotive boiler. It is not. It's actually a Cornish boiler. So I'm going to refilm that part of the episode. I believe you'll see that in part 3 of Mount Shamrock. It's a 7-metre Cornish boiler. So yeah, I just made the incorrect assumption that once the boilers got to a certain size, that they were all locomotive boilers, but that's not the case. It's a Cornish boiler. So let's get ready to explore. You guys are in for a treat if you like mining and mining history. There's plenty to see here. There's some old equipment that's been left here from the 60s and 70s. Let's get cracking. It's going to be awesome. Morning everybody, welcome back to another episode of Queensland Abandoned Mines, and today we are absolutely pumped. or maybe just to start off with, this land is on private property, and it has taken us several months of networking through the community to first find the owners and then seek permission to be here today. And just really clearly, the owner does not allow or want anybody out here trespassing. He can actually see where we are right now from his front veranda. There is a caretaker just to the northwest of this property. There's a caretaker to the east, and you will be caught. So do not make your way out this way, guys. And no, we will not be sharing any contact details for the property owner. And like I said, very grateful to be here. So today we're at probably the #1 site that we wanted to inspect since we started this historical plight for mining history. We are at Mount Shamrock. Now we're just approaching the main shaft here that is meant to go down over 600 feet. Look at that monker. The reason why we're here is to document what's left of the probably 70 or 80 years of mining that's happened here. So it started as early as 1887, and there is still a mining lease here, although we don't think they're doing too much with it. That's another reason why you will be charged if you make your way onto this property. It is obviously very dangerous. But getting back to the reason we're here, where we live, this is geographically is the closest spot that resembles a little mini gold rush. So when they first struck gold here at Mount Shamrock in 1887, they pulled 6,550 ounces of gold, mostly out of these pockets here and all these drives shooting south and east. And look at that big one down there. That's a huge drive going in. And the miners didn't have the best of luck here. So I think within about the first 10 years of blasting this enormous shaft, well, this isn't a shaft, this is a glory hole. You could almost fly a helicopter down this thing. The fortune didn't really swing, and I think they mined a lot of the gold resources out pretty early. So I think this claim that we're on now, around the year 1900, was the consolidated Shamrock #1 claim. So all of the mining leaseholders in this area had to come together and sort of fortify their leases to pay the bill. So what I'm just going to do now, I'm just going to extend my go pole out. It is way too dangerous to jump over the fence, and the property owner said not to do anything silly, and we'll be respectful of that. So let's have a look and see if we can see what's down the bottom of this monstrous shaft. Alright, well, this might not look like much to some, but for us this is a really cool piece of history. Seeing all these logs are pretty much all lined up, and we do have some historic maps of this area. I believe this might be the little remains of what was the assay house. It's in pretty close proximity to the huge glory hole that I believe they would have pulled all the ore out of, and it means that the mine was a fair old size back in its day. So they actually treated some of the ore here. There's some cyanide settling tanks we'll show you on the other side of the property. Obviously, because the origins of this mine were around 1887, it was steam powered. We have been told by the property owners that there's a loco boiler on this property, so we're looking forward to seeing that. So if they could afford to have an assay house here, and they're processing the ore here, they obviously got some really good ore out. But like I just mentioned before, I don't think it lasted too long. So the years of mining at Mount Shamrock, 1887 to around about 1910, 1912. Might have been a little bit of activity with some other mining claims being set up here around the 20s and the 30s. But what we're about to show you now is what's left. You guys can probably see it just through the trees here. You can see a big crane. That's the remnants of what's left from the mining lease that expired around 1980. And we've already been down there and had a look at that. There are some really cool mining artifacts on this property. That's why we're so excited to be here. And I'll show you what the miners in the 80s were up to. It was absolutely crazy. We'll get to that in a second. All right, we're coming up on a couple of cool old relics left in the bush. This is definitely not from the 80s. We'll get to all that gear in just a second. These old compressor pipes lying here rusting away, and this beautiful old steam boiler, that would all be from the earlier workings of the Mount Shamrock gold mining operation. And the boiler that's on the other end of this property is rumoured to be about 5 to 6 times the size of this. You can see a lot of this has been stripped out. So that's where they would have fired it. And right where my hand is would have been the huge impeller, and that would have driven a crank or a flywheel, and that would have led to probably one of the first hoists to pull that ore up out of the ground. And you can see we've got some remnants of some old miners' ladders here. Really cool stuff. Alright, so we're standing on one of the enormous waste rock piles. This is probably from the 80s. You can tell it's waste rock because of the size of the rocks that are up here. So like a tailings pile looks different. But I don't think they actually sluiced for their gold here. I believe they used a really weak concentration of cyanide and they left it in the settling ponds. And I think now they use electromagnets. I'm not an expert. But I think back in the day they used zinc after they'd leached off that cyanide. Check this out. This is what's left from the 1980s. So I've checked the badge on that. That's a Qld'S crane from the, I believe, the late 60s or the late 70s. Don't think she'd run anymore. I'll see if I can do some research in that and actually put up the model number of it. How cool is that? Check out what they were doing. So we've got the huge boom that goes up that links to this thing. We think we've pieced together what they were doing. I would say below that is probably a capped shaft. So I don't really want to stand on that, and I won't. But I'd say the men would be loaded up in this for the day, and they would be lowered down this shaft. Now I think this shaft is meant to go down about 350 feet. Whoa. Wowee. Now let's turn my light on for a sec, guys. Hang on a sec. Alrighty. Alright, I don't think the GoPro's going to pick that up. Might try and zoom in. You can tell the shaft isn't from the late 1800 stuff. It's all concreted. And you can tell how smooth they blasted the shafts in the 80s. This is more modern mining. I can see water right down the bottom there. A huge echo. You fall down that, you are gone. That is why they do not allow people out on this property without permission. So imagine setting off for work at the start of the day and relying on that thing. What would you do if it failed? Sheesh. So I'll have to see if I can do some digging and see what they actually pulled out in the 80s, but I don't think it was much, and it's really clear they didn't do any reclamation on the property. I don't know how excited the property owner is about that. It's all just left sitting here rusting away. How cool is that? And a few people might think this is a really expensive way of doing mining. I would probably think the opposite. So getting a crane up here, which may have been on its last legs, would probably still be cheaper than fabricating a huge poppet head, which would all be custom made, and a big diesel powered hoist. It was probably cheaper to bring this thing up here, and maybe the added advantage that if they didn't know where they were going to be mining exactly, their plant was mobile. That actually looks like a huge skip car. Wowee. That's not welded, that's all bolted and riveted. So that would be the earlier stuff. Let's get a shot of this crane. How cool is this, guys? Alright, let's keep exploring. Alright guys, we found our first little adit of the day. There's just a little bit about exploring mines. Obviously you can't be here without permission of the owner, or you drift onto this property without written permission, and that would constitute trespass. There's some other equipment you have to have if you go anywhere near abandoned mines. Probably the number one most important thing
we've got a Beauchamp gas sensor. Now it's a 4 gas sensor. It's got to be calibrated by a professional that really knows what they're doing about every 6 months, because these things can drift. Now, a lot of people think in mines that there's no real danger until you hit hydrogen sulfide, methane. That's not true at all. Probably the number one danger in mines is in fact just low oxygen. So the rocks weren't meant to be blasted, so when the miners are bored through these tunnels, the rocks breathe. And that can lower your oxygen levels to a dangerous amount. So without checking it, I haven't turned ours on yet, but this is probably going to be about 20.9, which is normal atmosphere. Really bad air is around about 15, and extremely dangerous air is around about 10 to 12. And if you're exposed to that last here and you don't have a gas meter, and you're not right near the portal of the mine, you probably won't make it out. I've heard some pretty hardcore stories about people encountering some dangerously low O2, and it can happen without warning. So got to have a gas meter, got to have a radio, got to have a lot of lights, got to have a hard hat, because these aren't natural caves. These have been blasted by humans, and some of the workings that we're going in today are almost 125 years old. So yeah, you've got to make sure you're well prepared, and you've got to make sure you've got permission to be on the land to start with before you even encounter any of that. So let's check out the first drift of the day. I think this is actually going to open up to the enormous pit. This is going to be epic. Let's do it. Alrighty guys, here we are. Coming through the first portal of the day into the first adit. You can see they've had some water in here. Now, unfortunately, we've got some dead cattle. And we've got some beautiful, cool air. It is hot today. So I'm just doing my usual snake check. Sorry, just got to get my light for a sec. Now, I have a habit of getting so excited when I find these mines that I completely forget to keep the camera still. So I'll try my best today, guys. Here we are. This is a pretty big drift. So although we might be standing in an original tunnel, I would say that this has been widened in the 80s. Because back in the 1980s, that is, sorry. Not in those late 1800s, early 1900s. The miners back in the day generally did not bore a tunnel this big. They just did the absolute minimum. Oi! Oi! Entering our first little chamber here. Like I say, the miners did the bare minimum to just attack the vein that they were after, and nothing really more. Wow, this is epic. I got some survey markings on the ribs here. That would be from the 80s as well. I've got a bit of drill steel left in one of the ribs. So the story of this place, for those of you that are really interested in the history of it, what led us out this way was a book, or it's a journal, from an author called Geraldine Mate. It's a really interesting read. We found it on Academia. I'm actually going to print out a copy and give it to the landowner. I'm sure they've read it, but just in case they haven't. It's the relationship between the mining that went on out this way and the Paradise Goldfields, which is sort of more to our north-northeast. Oh, we got bats. And I've got a really soft floor. So, like I said in the intro, this is as close as it came, other than Gympie. And there's a few articles that call this place a mini gold rush, and that's probably about right. I think it got up to about 80 miners, and I think it would have had a lot more success if they never struck gold at Paradise. So what makes this this journal that I was referencing really interesting is they talk about the relationship and the migration of the miners and the miners' families between where we are today at Mount Shamrock and Paradise. Check this out, guys. Holy smokes. So I'll give you guys a rundown on what I think we've got here. I'm not going to stand on that. It's highly unlikely there's going to be anything below us, but just in case. So we've just come in this adit here, and I'd say they've driven this in late 1800s. This might have been one of the first ones to go in when they actually started looking for the gold up off the creek bed. I'd say what's happened here, guys, is look straight across this glory hole here. Oh boy. Okay, that's as close as I'm getting. Look straight across, guys. My light is shining into an adit. Now it would have linked up to right where we're standing now. What has happened, I would say, this is I'm guessing, they found really good values in the sill of the mine, they found really good values in the back of the mine, and they've blasted straight up and straight down. And that's probably where all of the good gold reserves are. I can see some mineral deposits down there. That's more copper staining. This is the biggest mine we've ever been to by a country mile. And boy, are we stoked to be here. Look at the size of this shaft, guys. So I'm going to do, just to be safe, I'm just going to step back. I do have my harness on today. So I'm just going to tie a rope around that little drill steel that was back there. You've got to be safe. I'm just going to extend my go pole out, and I'm just going to see if we can see down the bottom of this absolutely monstrous shaft. All right, give me a sec. Alrighty guys, that's about as close as I can get without doing anything silly. Oh, I can't see what you can see yet. Hopefully you can see the bottom. I dare say there'd be water down there. Wowee. You'll see back up to the top of that. I mean, what would you call this? A glory hole, open stope? Insane. You can see we've got a little exploratory drift there that just faces out. You've got some graffiti there, that's chalk. It's maybe people tagging the place that weren't allowed to be here. And some more survey markings. Wowee. Let's keep exploring. Oop. I'm going to make my way out, guys, and see you guys at the next one. We've got so much more to show you. Today is going to be absolutely epic. I just got to make sure I don't disturb the bats. Just the same warning as the last one, Rat, just be careful because the bats hate the daylight, so I'm sort of accidentally pushing them out. I just don't want any of them to bump into me. Yeah, they're micro bats. Again, I'm just walking real slow because I don't have my goggles on. They're coming your way, so just be careful, okay? If they hit daylight, they really freak out. I don't want to stress them out. Thanks for tuning in, guys. That concludes part 1 of what will end up being a 3-part series on Mount Shamrock abandoned gold mines. Now, if you like the episode and you don't want to miss the following 2 that's going to air at 7 o'clock the following 2 Friday nights, just got to hit the little subscribe button, hit the bell icon, and that means you'll be notified when we air those episodes. So just stay put. We've got a little outro for you of all the cool photos we captured for today, and take a special note with the final 2 photos which show where we're going to head to the next 2 weeks, the bottom of this monstrous shaft. It's really cool. Stay tuned.